Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. Our guest today is a leading Syrian intellectual, Yassin al-Haj Saleh. Thank you very much for being with us here today on the France 24 set.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
You're one of the keenest observer of the Assad regime. You were jailed for 16 years by Hafez al-Assad because you were a member of the Communist Party in Syria. In 2013, you were forced into exile by the regime of his son, Bashar al-Assad. You currently live in Turkey. You have written several articles, a number of articles, while you were there and since your departure. Some of them are being published in a book. It's published in French, La Question Syrienne, the Syrian Questions, by the publisher Accuses, and it should be published in English as well. It provides an inside look at what has been a revolution at the beginning, clearly now a crisis, not only a Syrian crisis, a regional crisis, a global crisis with no end in sight, it seems. When the revolution, as it's known, started in 2011, many people thought Bashar al-Assad would go quickly. You were one of them.
That's right. The context was the Arab Spring. Hosni Mubarak, who ruled Egypt for 30 years, was gone in 18 days. Before him, Zain al-Abidin bin Ali was overthrown in less than a month. A revolution in Libya at that time, a revolution in Yemen, a revolution in Bahrain. The Syrian uprising was the sixth. So there were optimism everywhere, and we thought, and I think all the observers in our country and in the West everywhere, thought that this wave of revolutions cannot be defeated, and maybe, if not in a few weeks, maybe in months, this regime will be overthrown. But then I think the Assad regime in Syria, which is, Syria is a republic, and Hafez al-Assad, Bashar inherited his father in his post, and they were in power for 41 years when the uprising began. It is different. The real constitution of this regime is to stay in power forever. And pupils of schools in Syria and people of the army every morning would shout, إلى الأبد إلى الأبد يا حفظ الأسد. That's forever, forever, Hafez al-Assad, and then for his son.
But you could argue it was also the case probably in Egypt, in Tunisia. What made the difference in Syria? Why 5 years later Bashar is still here and clearly in power?
We have two states in Syria, the apparent state or the outer state, which is the government, the ordinary army, and the inner state, which is still unified. And there's an important sectarian element in this. And there is also, in a way, a sectarian axis, regional axis. So I think this is the one important reason behind this coherence of the regime after 5 years. Egypt was not this way, nor Tunisia. Maybe Libya is not very different from Syria on this level.
Obviously, this has taken a more personal dimension for you. Your brother, Firas, was abducted by the Organization of the Islamic State in 2013. A couple of months later, your wife, Samira al-Khalil, was kidnapped in the town of Douma, near Damascus, alongside some well-known activists, including Razan Zaytouneh, who is a leading human rights advocate. The assumption is that they were kidnapped by a group called the Army of Islam, Jaish al-Islam. Do you have any news from your brother or your wife or those other people?
I'm sorry to say, no, we don't have any news about my brother and many of my friends. Dr. Ismail Hamad, Father Paulo Dalilio, many others who were abducted by Daesh in summer and fall of 2013. And I'm sorry to say also that, no, we don't have concrete, trustworthy information about Samira, Razan, Wa'il, and Nazem, the four that were abducted in December 2013. In a way, this personal dimension imbued my work with, and imbued the Syrian struggle at large with a tragic sense. And this maybe applies on me and one of millions of Syrians, indeed. When you have 500,000 of people killed, at least 5 million displaced outside the country, maybe 7 or 8 million displaced within the country, a lot of tragedies, and this is one of them.
But you spent years in jail because of the regime. Initially, you went into hiding thinking that the mukhabarat, the secret services, were after you. And those who seemingly detain people very close to you, it's not the regime. It's those Islamist groups, Daesh or Jaish al-Islam.
That's why I am speaking of a tragic dimension in this, because
you're an opposition person, and they're held by.
I'm still.
Yes.
And it is very difficult for us to fight on two fronts. Actually, there are three fronts: not only the regime, not only the Islamists. It is also the global or the international system, which is intervening in Syria and killing people, Russians, Americans, the alliance that the US is leading. So I find myself in maybe one of the unprecedented positions of a writer in such a situation. The public dimension of the struggle are intermingling with the private thing, and I am not sure how to deal with this very complex situation.
I want to get quickly to the attitude of the international community. There's been a lot said about the so-called red lines, about the chemical bombing in 2013. President Obama was criticized. However, in this book, you mentioned another time in 2013 where you think that the opposition was about to take over Damascus and that there was outside pressure from the United States through Saudi Arabia not to take over Damascus.
Yes, I think that this was possible. I was in Douma. I was in Damascus in hiding for 2 years after the revolution. Then I went to Douma in April 2013. And I have connections, I have friends. And these were our information, and I believe in these information. Of course, not an American official told me this, but I think it was possible. The regime was banished from Douma in weeks and from all the Eastern Ghouta, and then everything stopped abruptly. There's a hidden, and there are a lot of hidden and unknown information about what happened, but my information from friends there, that Jaish al-Islam was pressured by the Saudis, who were pressured by the Americans not to enter to Damascus. And
why? Very quickly, why? Why not?
They want to engineer everything on their interests. They are not interested of the Syrians will overthrow the regime, and then they will be in a better position to the Saudis didn't want a real change in Syria, and
the Americans are saying we want Bashar gone. The Saudis are saying they want Bashar gone. You say, from what you witnessed, they did the opposite.
You know that after the chemical massacre, the Americans punished the weapon, not the criminal. And with the Russian, three winners, the Americans who disarmed the regime from its chemical weapons, the Russians who saved a client regime, the regime who saved itself and stayed in power, and who was the loser? the Syrians, the Syrian rebels, the Syrian people. And this is a despicable day that will never be forgotten. I think that deal, that American-Russian deal, I personally will never forget that there was a big betrayal of the Syrian. And at that time, only 100,000 of people were killed by Bashar. And now 500,000. Who's responsible of this? I think the ones who want democracy in Syria, and you see that from that day of the chemical massacre, they stopped speaking about change or democracy. They began to speak about Daesh every day. We were bombarded by news about Daesh and beheading and everything. And they annexed our struggle to the war on terror. So the change in Syria, the revolution in Syria became something unimportant.
Just to conclude, to be clear, the Russians clearly support Bashar al-Assad, but what you're saying is that America, the West, the regional allies say they want Bashar gone, but in reality, they want him to stay. Very quickly.
Well, I am not saying that all the regional and all the Western powers, but the Americans, yes, and the Israelis. They want either Bashar to stay in power or this situation, that deal.
So you expect him to stay for a long time?
Or to engineer things in a way that they took him out just to save everything else. Everything will stay as it was before. Maybe only Bashar with his billions in Panama or in Switzerland or I don't know where to enjoy the rest of his life.
Yassin al-Haj Saleh, thank you very much for coming on the France 24 set to give your personal testimony about the tragic situation in Syria. Thank you very much for watching this edition of the interview here on France 24. Stay tuned for more news.